Hi, I am Ron Wilkie, your cybersecurity quarterback, project manager, program manager, CISSP. And this presentation is part 6 for our PCI introductions. And in this presentation, we're actually going to talk about the goals of PCI and the standards which completes or will fulfill those goals. And we will actually go into requirement number 1. So this is why you're here. This is what you really need to know. The previous videos were just setups for this video and the videos going forward, or the presentations going forward. So what are these 6 goals? These 6 goals, you can see them right here. Build and maintain a secure network and systems. Protect cardholder data. Maintain a vulnerability management program. Implement strong access control measures. Regularly monitor and test networks, maintain an information security policy. So these 6 goals are followed by 12 standards, which will fulfill these goals. So each one may have 2 or 3 different standards, which will align with it. So this first one, build and maintain a secure network and systems. Well, let's look at our 12 standards or requirements. The first 2 align with this: build and maintain a secure network and systems, and protect cardholder data. So 1 and 2 align with that one. So number 1, install and maintain a firewall configuration to protect cardholder data, and do not use vendor supplied defaults for system passwords and other security parameters. So let's talk about number 1. Requirement number 1. Firewalls. Now I know that's a lot of little text, and I hate seeing little text on the screen, so you don't have to read it all right now. You can just listen to my voice as I explain it. But requirement number 1 focuses on firewalls. So what is a firewall? A device that controls the passage of traffic between networks and within an internal network. So you have your external network and your internal network, and the firewall divides the 2 or 3 or 4 depending on the type of network or network systems you have prepared. And it will talk about this, but it basically monitors that traffic and decides what goes and what comes. All right, so you can see these subsets: 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and 1.5 of requirement number 1. So let's talk about each one of these in depth. All right, let's go. 1.1. Establish and implement firewall and router configuration standards. All right, so 1.1, in order to do that, I have here how you test that particular requirement. You need to inspect the firewall and router configuration standards and other documentation. So this is a standard which is documented for those to read and to follow, and verify that the standards are complete and implemented. So first, you should have a document which talk about how you implement and establish firewall configurations, and it should be followed. So you want to test that. In 1.1, 1 and 1.1.2 and also 1.1.3, those are subsets of 1.1 which allow that to take place. So requirement 1.1 points to having a change control process. So if you're going to make changes to the firewall settings and configuration, you need a process. 1.2 states simply you need to have some type of network diagram. And 1.3 states that you should know and have documented the flow of the card holder data. So your network diagram can have how the card flow data, the card holder data, how it goes in and out of your network. All right, so that's 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3 in a nutshell. You can always pause the video and actually read the screen. All right, so requirement 1.1.4 requires that the firewalls be located at any DMZ or internet connection. All right, so using a firewall on every internet connection coming into and out of the network. You want to make sure that there's a firewall there and between any DMZ and the internal network. This allows the organization to monitor and control access and minimize the chances of malicious individuals or hackers obtaining access to the internal network via any unprotected connection. So do you understand what that means, what I just stated? Tried to break it down for you. Basically, you need to have a firewall with the DMZ, demilitarized zone, so that you can have your almost public access in this DMZ of untrusted material in a firewall, and then your internal network. 1.5 basically states that this is the description and roles of assignments and responsibilities, which ensures that personnel are aware of who is responsible for the security of all network components, and that those assigned to manage those components are aware of their responsibilities. If roles and responsibilities are not fully assigned, devices could be left unmanaged. That's 1.5 in a nutshell. Do you want me to continue talking about 1.5, or do you want me to go to 1.6? This is 1.6. I think I still want to talk about 1.5. So what happens, many instances, compromises usually happen due to unused or insecure services and ports. So you want to make sure that your configuration standards include a description for the groups and roles of people responsible for those ports. So I just made sure wanted to make sure that I threw that in there. All right. So let's go to, that leads us to 1.6. Requires that all services, protocols, and ports needed for business must be documented and have a documented business justification for each service. So when I was talking about those compromises, they often happen due to unused or insecure services and ports actually. Since these often have vulnerabilities, and many organizations don't patch vulnerabilities for services and protocols and ports they don't use. So you have to know what you're using and what you are not using. By clearly defining and documenting these services, protocols, and ports that are necessary for business, organizations can ensure that all other services, protocols, and ports are disabled or removed. Approval should be granted by personnel independent of the personnel managing the configuration. That's 1.1.6 in a nutshell. All right, you want to continue on, or you want me to stay on that a little bit longer? Well, let's look at some examples. All right, so we talked about the DMZ. This is a very simple example. And actually, this is kind of old, but you have the internet, you have your firewall, your DMZ, then your internal firewall, and your internal network. When I say old, I just mean that there are other ways to set up your network, but this explains it very simply. You see that? Your internet, your firewall, your DMZ, your internal firewall. So you're blocking a lot of traffic, and right here you're blocking a ton of traffic from getting to your corporate network. All right, let's look at another way to look at this. This is a little bit more modern. You have your internet, you have your firewall, and it can separate and send information to your DMZ or straight to your corporate network. But in this case, you have one firewall, which is capable of sending traffic to multiple locations. Okay, let's keep it moving. This is another type of way to look at it. You have your internet, you got your DMZ, two DMZs, which replicates the information. What's special about this is, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but when you're auditing, you have replication, so you can, if a hacker comes in and change the logs here, they may not have changed the logs there. But you got two DMZs where information can go, depending on how you have your rules set up. And you have a firewall, and you have your internal network. And you can see in this particular view, you have information that's being blocked from the firewall or let through, as you can see here. But you'll see how there are requirements where internal IPs are not supposed to go outside of this internal firewall. But one thing you know, if you're a seasoned professional, port 80 usually is always open. Port 443 is usually always open because that's your HTTP. But you can set up certain things and you can make sure that that doesn't necessarily happen. But that's just a side note. You're not supposed to necessarily send information through here. All right, let's keep it moving. Requirement 1.1, any insecure services, ports, or protocols must have documented security features that are implemented according to the firewall and router configuration standard. So we can beat this all day long, but basically everything needs to be documented and standardized. Firewall and router rule sets need to be reviewed at least every 6 months to ensure that the rules support the organization's business needs. This is important for PCI. You have to do this right here, every 6 months. So that was 1.1. Remember, we have to go to 1.5. So let's talk about 1.2. Requirement 1.2 covers the control of traffic into and out of the cardholder data environment and restricting connections between untrusted and trusted networks and components in the card data environment or cardholder data environment. So how do you test this? You want to examine the firewall and router configurations and perform the following to verify the connections are restricted between the untrusted networks and system components in the cardholder data environment. And we'll talk about some of these things. Let's keep it moving. The requirement includes that all inbound and outbound traffic be limited to only that which is necessary for the CDE and that all other traffic is denied. So you want to make sure that whatever traffic is going through is appropriate and needed, not just everything, and it should be documented. Configuration must be synchronized with the startup configuration. So this is important because, as systems start up and die down, you want to make sure that on startup, it is always starting the configuration process, that the configurations are always being implemented. You want to make sure that always takes place. Firewalls are required between all wireless networks and the CDE to deny or control all traffic between the wireless environment and the CDE. So why is that so important? Because wireless networks can be compromised. There are plenty of ways that you can crack a WEP or WPA. Right now they're saying WPA2s are not crackable, but there's some other things that you can do, like you can disable the network and then jump on as other people jump on by duplicating their credentials. So you want to make sure that there are always firewalls in between the wireless network and your cardholder data environment. And I have a graphic here. You have the internet, your wireless access point. So this is all untrusted information coming in from the internet. You have your firewall here, which separates your protected information from this untrusted area. All right. Cool. Let's keep it moving. 1.3. We're getting there. We're almost there. Let's see. Man, we're 13 minutes into this video. Wow. All right. 1.3. There are subsets of 1.31, 1.32, 1.3.3. So while there may be legitimate reasons for untrusted connections to be permitted to the DMZ systems, to allow public access to a web server or something of that nature, these connections should never be granted to systems in the internal network. A firewall's intent is to manage and control all connections between public systems and internal systems, especially those that store, process, or transmit cardholder data. If direct access is allowed between public systems and the CDE, the protections offered by the firewalls are then bypassed, and system components storing cardholder data may be exposed to compromise. So that's it in a nutshell. It's kind of like 1.2 a little bit, but it's just regurgitating everything to make sure that you build and maintain network systems. Remember that first goal. So I didn't read these. You can read those as needed, but I just summarized it for you of why it's important. Some of these, I won't read all of them, but I'll try and do a summary because you can read these for yourself. All right, so if cardholder data is located within the DMZ, it is easier for an external attacker to access this information. So if you have data in the DMZ, an attacker can get to that data if it's in the DMZ. So that's why you do things like honeypots. That's not what this video is about. I just thought I'd mention it. Sometimes you have honeypots where you lure attackers, not necessarily lure, but you allow attackers to go to your DMZ into a honeypot where they think they're getting information, but they're really not. So since there are fewer layers to penetrate, that makes it easier for an attacker to get to that data if it's in the DMZ. Securing system components that store cardholder data in an internal network zone that is segregated from the DMZ and other untrusted networks by a firewall can prevent unauthorized network traffic from reaching the system component. You got that? Basically, put your cardholder data in the internal network, not in the DMZ. So that's what these 1.3.4, 5, and 6 are referring to. So I'm trying to summarize it so that you don't have to read every single thing. So 1.3.7, do not disclose private IP addresses and routing information to unauthorized parties. Right? So, and these are the different methods. So restricting the disclosure of internal or private IP address or addresses is essential to preventing a hacker from learning the IP address of the internal network. If they know the IP address, they can directly connect to it over the internet and using that information to access the network. Interview personnel and examine documentation to verify that any disclosure of private IP addresses and routing information to external entities is authorized. So you just want to make sure you're not giving away internal IP addresses. I mean, that's not really hard to do. And that's not like rocket science. Or is it? Maybe it is. I don't know. But there's a standard around it or a requirement around it. And that is it, 1.3.7. 1.4, we're getting toward the end. Install a personal firewall software or equivalent function on any portable computing devices. All right, so you may have a laptop or a tablet or a phone and you shouldn't be using a phone or a tablet to connect to your cardholder data environment. But let's just say you are. You're a small business and you have everything on your tablet and you're doing all of this. You want to make sure that you have a personal firewall installed on those systems. Portable computing devices that are allowed to connect to the internet from outside the corporate firewall are more vulnerable to internet-based threats, meaning you could have software or a virus on your laptop or your tablet or phone, and if you use it to connect to the cardholder data environment, then the person who developed that virus can now connect to that location on your internal network. Doing this helps to protect devices from internet-based attacks, which could use the device to gain access to the organization's systems and data once the device is reconnected to the network. So inspect, if you're doing a test of your system or your PCI or your network, inspect a sample of company and or employee-owned devices to verify that personal firewalls are installed and configured per your organization's specific configuration settings. So based on your remember those standards I was talking about? Based on your standards, make sure that it's set up according to those standards. The personal firewall you have to make sure it's actively running as well. And the personal firewall is not altered by users of that portable computing device. So if you have a device and it's portable, make sure it has the firewall on there, right? The firewall software, and make sure it's running, and make sure that it can't be changed by the user, right? Okay, cool. You got that? All right, now we're down to our last one. Basically, personnel need to be aware of and follow security policies and operational procedures to ensure firewalls and routers are continuously managed to prevent unauthorized unauthorized access to the network. That's all 1.5 is saying. And to test it, you need to examine documentation and interview personnel to verify that security policies and operational procedures for managing firewalls are documented, in use, and known to all affected parties. That's it for requirement 1. You have any questions, send me a note, like the video, and thank you for watching. On to requirement 2.